What we're doing is we're trying to use our additional slots that we get when we're training 4 days a week or 5 days a week to add in additional slots of movement to get more volume, more hypertrophy with less impact on the joint. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome back to Barbell Logic, and welcome back to another M.E.D. Masterclass. As always, this is your producer, Trent, and you are listening to number 8, and the last in the series as it was initially conceived and delivered to the Barbell Logic coaches. We do actually have some extracurricular material that we might release in the future, but this is the end of the core series. Thanks for sticking with us so far. I hope you've learned something about programming in this whole process. You know, definitely these are episodes where there's a lot of stuff to take in. So keep coming back to these episodes as you progress in your own training and you're moving through the different phases of advancement. Come back to these episodes because there's a lot of good nuggets here that you can use in your own programming. So we're going to talk today about accessory lifts. Now, if you remember, going back to Masterclass number 5 and 6, we talked a lot about supplemental lifts. And if you remember from those episodes, supplemental lifts are lifts that look a lot like the main barbell exercises. So that would be stuff like a tempo squat or a pin squat or a press start or a paused deadlift. So you can see that most of the supplemental lifts are essentially variations on the quote-unquote competition lifts or the main barbell movements. So accessory lifts, in contrast, are lifts that don't look very much like the main barbell movements, but we find them to be really useful nonetheless. Stuff like chins, curls, dips, barbell rows. These are things that we all use in our programs, but they don't necessarily fulfill the criteria that we laid out at the beginning of the master classes, as well as the main lifts do. So that's where we're going to start off today. We're going to talk about why we use accessory lifts, why we would use them in place of just doing more of the barbell lifts, and then we're going to talk about different types of accessory lifts that you can do and how those would fit into the context of a minimum effective dose-based program. And then in the second half of the episode, Matt opened up the floor to the coaches for some Q&A covering basically any of the topics that have come up over the previous 7 episodes. So get out your pens and pencils and let's listen in to Masterclass number 8.
So now the question is, why do we even need to do, or do we even need to do accessories? Let me start with this question. Are accessories necessary? Accessory movements necessary? And that's a huge blanketed statement.
The consensus was it depends on your level of advancement as a lifter. So for a novice, not so much. For an intermediate or advanced lifter, much more so.
Okay, so for those who if you think they are necessary, why? Why are they necessary for those advanced lifters?
One coach argued that accessories can be used to accumulate more work, which can be helpful for hypertrophy or just getting more volume in, which could help with strength gains down the road.
So I think that the rule of, or our 3 primary criteria, apply to accessory movements just like they apply to the barbell movements, right? We still want to choose accessory movements that work the most muscle mass, typically, greatest effective range of motion, and allow us to handle the most weight. But those accessory movements are typically still going to be less of compound exercises than the big barbell movements are. It's the reason we choose the big 4, because the big 4 uses the most muscle mass out of the infinite number of exercises that there are. And because you use a barbell, you can incrementally load them. You can use tons of weight, big ranges of motion. If we start to look at things like a barbell row, right? A barbell row really doesn't look anything like any of the lifts that we do, any of the 4 main lifts. How much weight can you use on a barbell row? Well, how much weight can you use on a barbell row compared to your deadlift? Probably up to 50%. Yeah, I mean, I had a 725 deadlift. I was not rowing 365. That's a super cheater row. You want to have all sorts of body English. I could probably do that and touch my belly with it once or twice. So, but again, then part of the deal is with accessory, we've noted that we're trying to push up volume typically. So we're going to do them for a little higher reps in general for the most part. So yet they still give the lats a tremendous amount of work, right? For those of you guys who've ever done barbell rows, or you've ever done big, heavy dumbbell rows, or what used to be called croc rows, where you just be these like real heavy bent over dumbbell rows, right? Chins, especially if you get decent at chins and you're able to start doing weighted chins, weighted dips first, and then weighted dips. I actually really like dips with like chains around my neck. I think it helps you lean forward and actually potentially put you in a better position for your shoulder rather than a worse. I think the more horizontal your back is on a dip, the better position your shoulders in, and the more vertical your back is, the better chance you have of ramming the head of your humerus up inside your, humeral joint. What are some of the other ones that you guys had on your list? Let's start with upper body only first. So we talked about rows, we talked about chins. Obviously, pull downs are the old per people version of those. Although I still like, if you got a really good pull down machine, I love really good pull downs for strong guys. All right, let them do chins one time a week. Let them do really good, heavy, big, full range of motion pull downs another time a week. I think it works great. What else?
Someone mentioned curls.
Curls are basically the only thing you can do for your bicep is basically curls, and then the big back exercises, which your biceps get work. If you do chins, your biceps get a significant amount of work on a chin. For triceps, you basically just have dips and you have rolling dumbbell extensions and LTEs, right? And everything else, like, what is the general problem with a tricep press down? Yeah, for most people at the gym, you rarely see the elbow move, right? So the elbow stays fixed and it's this. So you're only working the tricep down at its distal insertion. Sorry. I've got to get some of that shoulder flexion to actually allow the proximal head to get work. Now, that's the upper body. Those are the upper body movements. Why do I do those? Why do I need to do them? We talked about number one, it allows me to get more volume in with, nobody said it this way, but you all know this is true, more volume in, more hypertrophy with less joint beat up. You're not beating up your joints as bad. Now, can you beat up your joints with those accessory movements? Yeah, you can, but this would be my argument in general. It's pretty rare. And if doing those accessory movements causes pain around the joint, it's probably not the joint that's having the problem. It's probably the tendon. But that's going to be a Reynoldsism that I can't absolutely prove, but my experience says that's the case. When I do a rolling dumbbell extension or an LTE or a skull crusher or a dip and my elbows hurt, I don't have an elbow problem. I have a tricep tendonitis problem. It's pretty rare. Now, if I have osteoarthritis in my hips, which I do, and I'm doing high volume belt squats and my hips hurt because my hips have osteoarthritis in them. And there's no amount of belt squats that I can do that make the osteoarthritis go away, right? So we also have to be smart enough to understand what are the things that are like, okay, this person has osteoarthritis in a joint, or this person has a torn muscle belly, or this person has a torn lip. They're missing their MCL in their knee, or their ACL is partly torn. Like, we can't rehab that one away, right? You got a torn MCL, bro, got to have surgery, get that fixed. You don't have to have an MCL. I suggest that you do, but you don't have to. Lots of people don't, right? I had a guy, I think he DM'd me on Instagram, and he was like, I've been doing your Bill Star routine. He's like, I tore my calf muscle pretty bad last week. And then I've bruised up so bad that bruised all the way up behind my knee, and now the bruising's running back down. And I was like, are you sure you didn't tear your Achilles? Because you can't fix that. You can't start rehab the torn Achilles away. Right. So you got to be smart about that stuff. But most of the time, my experience says that I don't have joint problems, that those accessory movements aren't causing the joint problems. Most of the joint issues that we have are going to be caused by the big, heavy barbell movements. I've got some issues in my right shoulder, and the accessory movements don't tend to give it too much of a hard time. But the big, heavy presses sometimes do. Sometimes chins. I can't do chins. Can't do them at all. I can do pull-ups, but I can't do them supinated. So, okay. Any other questions about accessory movements? What we're doing is we're trying to use our additional slots that we get when we're training 4 days a week or 5 days a week to add in additional slots of movement to get more volume, more hypertrophy with less impact on the joint. That's the general goal of accessory movements. If you train 3 days a week, I would argue that it is going to be very difficult to ever have accessory movements in your program. And by the way, let me come back to the question that I asked earlier. I do not think accessories are absolutely necessary for anyone. I do not think they're absolutely necessary for anyone. I do think that they can be optimally used, especially for very strong, very advanced, and older, more beat up advanced lifters. You see lifters who are older, beat up, they've been really strong, they still are really strong, and they just can't get the volume in on the squat or the deadlift. They still squat and deadlift, but they just can't do very much volume. The accessory movements are a great way to get them more volume in without beating them up too bad. But as long as I can utilize those barbell movements for as long as I can with as much volume and intensity as I can, even using supplemental variants of the main lifts as I can, I'm going to do that. And accessory movements are just a tool in your tool bag to use if you need to get more volume in and your people are getting, or your clients or yourself feel like you're just getting more and more beat up. Accessory movements will allow you to sort of give your joints a break there. I do think Scott is correct that I'm going to try to program the accessory movement, typically, that works the antagonist muscles on the same workout that their opposite side works. And I don't think it's necessary to do this, but I do think that it makes some logical sense that I tend to try to train them in the same plane. So, for example, I'm going to tend to do rows on the day that I bench press, and I'm going to tend to do chins on the day that I press. Do you have to do that? No, you don't. But I like doing it. I also think that you should basically be able to barbell row correctly about what you bench press. Now, as you get really, really good at bench press, and because everything is so stable on a bench, you're probably always going to be able to bench press a little bit more than you row. But if you row 50% of your bench press, we got an imbalance issue. We got Jersey Shore bro issue, where all you do is work the mirror muscles, the stuff that you can see. Okay. Any questions about accessories?
One coach asked about accessories for novice lifters, and she brought up the example of an older lifter that has trouble keeping the bar racked on their back on squats. And this lifter was feeling a lot of pain and discomfort in their shoulders in the low bar squat position, mainly because they lacked muscle mass in their shoulders. So the question was, even though this lifter's a novice, would accessory lifts be appropriate to help them build additional shoulder mass so that they could squat productively?
Sure. So you're talking about like an older lifter with very little muscle mass and just the bar sitting on their back hurts. Yeah, I would actually try to increase frequency of the amount of times a week that they have the bar on their back. Now, if it's significantly worse from session to session, you're going to have to give them a break, right? And that's where a belt squat works perfectly fine for people. A belt squat onto a box, I like for older people, depending on how the belt squat is set up. Sometimes they can sit on a box. Sometimes the cable coming out from their crotch will inhibit that. But typically, a lot of that, you guys know how this works. Like the first time I remember when Sybil started deadlifting with a bar, she was like, oh, my hands. It hurts my hands so much. Like, she just didn't have calluses on her hands, right? And most of us don't get to see our upper backs very often. But for those of you with significant others that see your upper back, all of your significant others, if you have one, have said something about, holy shit, there's a huge line of scar tissue and callus across your upper back. And an older person will get that too. It won't be as intense as mine or Nick's or Burgos or whoever. But everybody gets that. So at some point, you just build up your skin gets tough, just like it does with any new sport or anything that you do, like where you haven't used that. Like most people have never put anything rough on that spot, and so they put it back there and they're like, "Ouch, that hurts." But I would almost always advise against using the pad on the bar because their skin will get tough pretty quick. So it's a good question. Some of it is also just dependent upon like if the person were my mom or my wife, I would just be like, harden the fuck up. Let's go. Because they're not paying me. But if this person is 80 and they're paying you and they're complaining and crying every time the bar is on their back, then you're probably going to have to make a modification, right? So again, that's what is optimal and what is best for business is not always exactly the same thing. We have to find a happy balance between the two sometimes. So I would suggest not to tell your 80-year-old people who are paying you $400 a month to harden the fuck up.
Someone else asked about using accessories just to stave off boredom in the weight room. It's like if you got a client who's just sick of doing the barbell lifts, could you add some accessories at the end of their workouts just to keep them engaged and excited to train?
Sure. Prowler, man. That's what I do the prowler for. People who think if you're in the middle of the process of trying to teach someone why we train the way we train and why learning the heavy barbell movements are important first, and they come from like a super fitnessy background, and they think part of every workout means that they need to sweat and get their heart rate up. That's where I do at the very end. I mean, like for about 6 minutes, like not very long, just have them push prowler real hard for like 6 minutes. It won't beat them up. It won't screw up their squat hardly at all. They'll feel great. They'll be like, oh, that was awesome. Almost threw up in the parking lot. You're like, yeah, that was great. You know. And the ladies will be like, I'm looking so much better from this cardio at the end of the workout. You're like, yeah, it's totally the cardio at the end of the workout that's making you look better. It's not the heavy squats. Right. But eventually, anybody that you train long enough, you brainwash them enough to tell them the truth. And they actually listen to you.
Another coach asked about using accessory movements for trainees that have busy work schedules. Maybe they're traveling a lot and they don't always have access to a place to do barbell training. So could they use accessory lifts with whatever they've got? Maybe it's a hotel gym, just to avoid detraining.
Yeah. Yes and no. So yes, how long can you do it before they would actually detrain on the barbell lifts? Like they're going to detrain on the barbell lifts relatively quick. However, I am 100% for habit forming. And if people need to go do training 3 or 4 times a week and they travel so much that, 2 weeks out of the month, they can only train twice a week, then 2 times a week, they're going to the hotel exercise room and they're going to do exercise. And it's not training, but we're just establishing habits. This is what we do. We establish the habit. And so if you let somebody that travels for work or business or, the military or whatever, if you let them be like, well, I traveled a bunch this week, so I didn't train at all, then it's going to be very hard for them to ever get into a consistent pattern of doing that. Now, that same person might not actually be able to train for a week, but they can exercise every day in the hotel gym. And so they can do those basic, and I have them do like basically air squats with whatever the heaviest thing is in that hotel gym. Kettlebell, they almost always have kettlebells or dumbbells in there. So, okay, I held a 45-pound or 2 45-pound dumbbells at my shoulders and I did squats that way. That's fine. Overhead presses or bench presses. I mean, I've done this lots of times. You go in, the heaviest set of dumbbells they have are 40s. I can bench press 40-pound dumbbells for like 120 reps. Probably not that many. It's a Reynolds exaggeration. But I can do it for a bunch, right? But I'm just going to do it because for me, I'm trying to establish a habit, right? So yeah, I think that And will it slow down the detraining effect? Yeah, I think it definitely will. I don't know that anybody's ever done a study on it, but it seems like it does. So, and the reality is that exercise is often the gateway drug to training. It's okay, right? It's okay. Like most of these people that we're going to train, their starting point is they've done nothing for 20 years but get fat and sit on the couch and watch Netflix. Right? So if somebody starts at, I hate Planet Fitness. I think Planet Fitness as a business model is awful. I think that every one of them should be burned to the ground. But I would never give somebody that's going to them a hard time because they don't know. They're ignorant. If they want to pay $10 to go walk on a purple treadmill, and that's the first thing they've done since the last 20 years, all they've done is watch Netflix. Yeah, Zumba. It doesn't matter. I don't care what they're doing. If they do anything to start, that's fine. That's fine. I'm never going to give them a hard time about that. And then I'm just going to start trying to walk them through. This is why we use the barbells. Barbells give us biggest bang for our buck, greatest return on our investment, shortest amount of workout time. Hey, you want to only train 45 or 50 minutes 3 times a week? We can do that, and you won't believe the change in your body 6 weeks from now. Just give me 6 weeks, right? One thing I forgot to mention really quick is how I program accessories. So one of the problems with accessories is because they use less muscle mass in general, you can't make progress on accessories forever, on an accessory movement forever. As a matter of fact, most people will find they'll kind of peak out on what they can do on that accessory movement in about 4 to 6 weeks. It won't necessarily be that short. And the first time somebody does it, they might be able to do those accessory movements for 3 months, but pretty quick, they're going to start to peak out on them. So what I do is I rotate the movement once you kind of peak out on it. So if I were going to do triceps, maybe I would do dips for as long as I could. I'm going to do body weight dips. Then I'm going to do some weighted dips, or I might alternate between body weight dips for volume and weighted dips for intensity. And then when I can't seem to make progress anymore, I would switch to an LTE. I would do LTEs then for 4 weeks or so. And then I could switch back to dips, or then I could go to rolling dumbbell extensions or something else. Do the same thing with back, right? So I'm almost always, if somebody can chin, I'm almost always going to have them do some sort of chin. And some of that's because I think the chin is just, there's something about having it help with shoulder mobility. I want to maintain that while I'm getting stronger. But I'll often rotate between barbell rows, dumbbell rows, lat pull downs if I have access to it, chins twice a week versus chins once a week. I'm just going to ride it as long as I can and then rotate the movement, right? Glute ham raises, I really like those. I've talked about it. I like those for lower body movement, but you do glute ham raises, after a while you can do 4 sets of 10, then you put a band around your neck. Doesn't take very long before you do 4 sets of 10. Then you jack up the back of the glute ham raise a little bit to where it's not quite safe, and the whole thing could fall forward. You do 4 sets of 10. Then what are you going to do? Well, just go to something else. Change the exercise. Right? So that's how I program that. Okay. Questions? What do you guys got for me?
All right. So that pretty much wraps up the discussion on accessory lifts. So at this point, Matt opened up the floor to the coaches to ask any questions they wanted about any aspects of M.E.D programming that we've discussed on the show thus far. So as usual, I'll step in for the coaches and narrate their questions, and then we'll listen to Matt's answers. So to kick it off, the first question was about peaking. How much time off do you give a lifter after a meet?
So how long of a rest, meaning how many days will I let them not train? Not very many. So what I tend to do, actually Burgos just did this. My general post meet week is going to be, if they do the meet on Saturday, on Monday or Tuesday, they're going to go in the gym and they're going to do 50% of what they maxed at the meet for a few sets of 5. They're just going to get some blood pumped in. On the upper body lifts, they might actually do sets of 8 with 50%. So it's super light. And then they're still going to train 3 times that week. Usually they're going to train 3 times that week. They're going to do full body training. And then they're going to do 60% on the second workout. And they're going to do like 70% on the third workout. And for most people, if they've peaked, if we follow this M.E.D principle, they're going to go right back into LP. They're kind of doing LP anyway, right? Because they went 50%, 60%, 70%. And then they're just going to make bigger jumps than they used to. I'm not going to try to keep them on LP as long as possible the second and third and fourth and 10th time through. So for strong people, they might do LP. Like Burgos may come back and do LP and make 20-pound jumps on squats 3 times a week, which means 60 pounds increased per week on his squat. Well, how long can you keep that up? Not very long. A couple weeks. Then it's right back, then it's the next step, then it's the next step. So I just try to move through the steps faster once they've done this. If that's if they've worked up to a peak. If they've taken a long layoff, if you went to Venezuela and all you could do is eat bugs for 4 months, you're probably just going to have to come back and do a normal LP, right? If you get real sick, when I have people come back from cancer, John Floater just had an appendectomy about 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago. 2.5 months ago. Yeah. And he pulled a PR set of 5 on LP on his deadlift this week. He hit 515 for a set of 5 on his LP. So he stood at 5 rep max on LP 2.5 months after abdominal surgery. And we started him super, super conservative. By super conservative, we did body weight everything and 10-pound weights on the barbell for his deadlifts. Like empty barbell. And we went up real slow. If you do that for 2.5 months, you just keep making progress, you hit all-time PRs. So I don't give them much time off. I just make their first workouts back really easy because the goal is just blood flow. A lot of times they have tendonitis. A lot of times they have joint issues. Things hurt. They feel like they got hit by a truck. So and resting doesn't seem to help that for those of you guys who have done it before. The longer you rest and you're just like, I still feel like I got hit by a Mack truck. When you finally drag your butt into the gym and just move a little bit and don't even lift heavy weights and just move, you leave the gym and you're like, oh, I feel better. That's the goal. The first few workouts after a peak is to leave the gym feeling better than you did when you started. All right, next question.
If you're using the dynamic effort method with a lifter, how do you select band tension or chain weight?
So there's a couple parts of this. So first off, Westside style powerlifting training is a 4-day split that is really DUP type training. It's training multiple facets at once, right? You're doing max effort training. We talked about this a little bit last week. Doing max effort training in a session, you're usually doing a dynamic movement, which just means you're moving the bar as fast as you possibly can. You're putting max effort force into the bar, even though there's with submaximal weight on the bar with me. And then you'll do some accessory movements. That's what you do. And so usually that type of training, and even if it's not that type of training, at some point for very advanced lifters, I love accommodating resistance. I love bands and chains. I don't know which one I like more. I know that bands are easy to throw in your backpack or your gym bag and take to the gym, and hauling hundreds of pounds of chain is harder. So for the bands, because they're cheap, I know about how much tension the bands give. And so depending on the person, they're typically going to do their upper body movements with mini bands. And they're going to start their lower body movements with what we call the green bands, which are the 1-inch bands. And that's going to be choked. And the mini bands are usually going to be doubled. So the mini bands are doubled for upper body. The range of motion is shorter for upper body. And the light bands are going to be choked. And they're going to get good at the light bands. And when I see that they get faster and better and faster and better and faster and better with those green bands, then we're going to go green bands plus mini bands. And they're going to get faster and better and faster and better and faster and better. And then after that, we're going to go up to the next step above green bands, which I forget is what color these days. I've been using them since the old jump stretch days before Rogue made them. And so that next step up from your green bands, Burgos, the original ones, would have been green. But I know they can't be green for Rogue, so I don't know what the next step up is on those. So then they would do that, right? So, and then also the thing with bands, the things you have to be careful with bands is because you actually can lower the bar faster than gravity can drop it. Like it's actually pulling down on the bar. You got to be very careful about how you use those. You can beat people up in a hurry and overtrain with them in a hurry. So when I start to see somebody like you did a few weeks ago, where you're like your bicep just all of a sudden went from being totally fine to not fine, we're yanking the bands off in a hurry. I'm going to yank the bands. Let's get healthy. We'll slowly add the bands back in. Chains carry over potentially better than bands do, but unless somebody's training at home, then they don't have access to the chain, or unless they're training at a big time powerlifting gym that has chains, they don't have access to chains. Titan started selling chains for cheap. I don't know if they still do. Titan Fitness. I bought a bunch. They're cheap. I mean, they're cheap. Now, if you live in a coastal area like you do, Burgos, chains are pretty cheap because they use them so much on boats and on docks, and I don't know, for anchors and stuff like that. But in Missouri, like, we have no reason to have 5/8 inch chain. Like there's nothing that you would use that for. So yeah, I could actually get them from Titan cheaper than I can get them from the local chain supply store here. And with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start people at about 50% to 60% of bar weight and about 20% chain weight, so that they're in the 80% range, bar plus chain. That's a super blanketed statement. And then there's the business side of it, which is when you ask your client, how much chain do you have? And you just use that because that's how much chain they have. So, I mean, that's an honest answer. So sometimes I think the band stuff is just in your head. Like, I think when you get good at taking 15 to 20% heavier than you've ever lifted in your whole life at the top of the lift, and you take that weight out on a squat and you're like, oh my God, the most I've ever squatted is 500 pounds and there's 600 pounds on my back right now. You're like, I'm going to die. And then you go down to the bottom and it's not 600 pounds and it's not 500 pounds, it's 450 pounds. And so then you can fire up out of the bottom, and then you're in a race to the top because you're like, it's going to get to be 600 pounds eventually, right? So then you get used to handling, whether that's on the squat or whether at the top of the deadlift. And of course, it's like so hard to hold on to at the top of the deadlift, or at the bench press when you take it out of the rack. Then when you go to your max and you try to set a new max and it was 500 pounds and you take 510 off on your back, you're like, this feels fucking light. I can do this, because you've had so much more weight on your back already. That's why there's another thing we haven't talked about, and this is really it's not even well studied, and I've just played with it some with some of my really advanced clients, is stuff like press starts. Press starts, like, just try to press a weight that you can't press. My small sample size of about 10 people, just about everybody across the board hits a new PR press on the third week they do it. If you put 10 pounds more ish, depends on how strong you are, 10 pounds, 10, 15 pounds, for females, maybe 5 pounds, 7.5 pounds more on the bar than you've ever pressed before. And you just do a press start and you just try to press it and try to grind in the middle for a little bit and then let it come back down and rack it. And you do that for like 2 singles at the end of your workout. On the third workout, you'll accidentally press your press start. You'll be like, oh my God, I just hit a new PR. Like, yeah, I know, because you're just used to handling heavier weight. So there's something to be said about just getting used to handling heavier weight than you've ever handled before. And that's what bands and chains help you do. Daniel says, how would you modify programming for someone who has a conditioning sport such as runner? Would you program their running if they asked you to? Sure. Same question for strongman. Sure. Yeah, for somebody that has a special need sort of thing, and for both strongman and running, those are high impact sports. High impact, they're different. One is high volume of higher impact, and one is low volume of insanely high impact. What I would do is, for running, I would have them run after. I would have them do their lower body workout, preferably in the morning, like on Monday, and then run afterwards. Or they might do their upper body on Monday, lower body on Tuesday morning, and then run on Tuesday afternoon, and then take Wednesday off. and then do the same and repeat. Upper body Thursday, lower body Friday morning, run on Friday afternoon, probably run again on Saturday, depending on how much they need you to actually run. For strongman, your heaviest, most hard pounding day of the week is almost always on Saturday, because that's when you do all the implements. And so you would do like farmer's walks and yoke. And I would also often do my max effort deadlift day that day. So I would deadlift on Saturday, and then I would do farmers and yoke and tire and stones on Saturday, or some combination thereof. And in that order, what I just said. And then I would rest as much as I could on Sunday. Saturday, we get done with strongman at Strong, when I owned Strong. We would all leave from strongman. We would go straight to Waffle House, for real. And we would get in an eating contest, and we could see who would eat the most food at Waffle House, because whoever eats the most food still only spent $15. So, 2 all-star specials, and they're both $7.99 a piece. That's a bunch of food. And then we'd take ice baths and stuff like that. And again, I don't know if that actually works. Probably doesn't. Makes you feel better. Makes you think you're doing something. Take a nap. Sunday's the Lord's Day. We're in the Midwest. We all go to church. We don't do anything except for me, and I teach M.E.D classes and then work all day. And then Monday you get up and you start training again. So the idea is, whatever the hardest, most pounding, high impact day you have, you want to make sure that you have a good rest day after that before you train again. That's the general concept there, whether that's running for the Army or whether that's training for strongman. And then some of your strongman training you can do during the training week, like your upper body stuff, or like your presses. Strongman presses axles, or they press a log. You can just press a log or press an axle instead of pressing a barbell on the press day. So I often wouldn't press on a Saturday. I would save Saturday for it's a pain in the ass. We got to go out in the parking lot. We got to haul 900 pounds of weight out here and put it on a yoke. Stuff I didn't want to do on a Tuesday evening. What else you got?
One coach had a question about older lifters, specifically older female lifters. Is there an upper limit for the amount of volume that you would program for that lifter?
Yeah, maybe one step at a time, right? I mean, and that, to me, this is the reason that minimum effective dose principles work better than anything else, because other people that don't use those principles would just give you their best guess. But I can tell you that we know that the vast majority of people can do 5 sets of 3. If they can do 5 sets of 3, they can probably do 6 sets of 3. See, let them do 6 sets of 3. Like, once they stop making progress with 5 sets of 3, and you can't increase the intensity anymore, try 6 sets of 3 and see if they get better. Back off their weight a little bit, run back up to 6 sets of 3, and then go 7 sets of 3. And then for some of your people, you're going to see, okay, they can't do 7 sets of 3. It's too much, right? So 7 sets of 3 is too much. 21 reps, 6 sets of 3. 18 seems to be about the top end. Like, they can do 18 work, or maybe they can do 7 sets of 3 on the upper body lifts, but they can't do 7 sets of 3 on the lower body lifts, right? One step at a time. So, and at some point you'll figure out, what they can do. I've got Will Morris right now. He's doing 5 sets of 6, just 30 reps, and he's just bitching me out on the staff Slack, because I'm the anti-volume guy, right? Everybody's like, he's the anti-volume guy. I'm like, you got to get it somewhere, man. He's super strong. So this week coming up, I just programmed him, and I was like, 30 work reps. I would like it to be 5 sets of 6. If you can't hit 5 sets of 6, you still got to give me 30 reps. So you got to give me 6 sets of 5 or whatever. Like, I don't care how many sets it takes. I need 30 work reps at this weight. So sometimes the programming will look like that. He's a super advanced lifter. He also has a very sort of crazy, you never know when life's going to be extra stressful and when it's not going to be. Days are going to be good versus bad. But I promise you, he can give me 30 work reps. It just might take him 8 sets to get there. And that's okay. One thing we didn't talk about in class that I think is just something that needs to be noted is I think that there should be a time for almost everybody. I think it's appropriate at some point as a late intermediate or early advanced, somewhere in that ballpark, probably early advanced, that you need to do a whole bunch of max effort work. And it doesn't have to be West Side style powerlifting stuff. I just think that there is something that happens. You might only be able to do it for 8 or 10 weeks, but I think that you should spend a lot of time trying to hit heavy singles. And you still have to get your back offs, right? So you can't just hit your heavy singles and then be like, I'm out. You still got to do like you got to do 2 more sets of 5 or 3 sets of 5 or whatever. But those heavy singles, and it depends on whether you're doing 1 heavy single or whether you're doing 3 heavy singles or 5 heavy singles or cross or whatever. But it changes something about your lifting to do those singles. And I think that it's very beneficial for everybody at some point. I'm trying to think. So I don't know, like Eddie, about where Eddie is right now. I don't know if you've ever done that, Eddie, but about where you are in programming right now in training life. If you get 8 to 12 weeks of time to just be able to lift heavy, that I think heavy singles are awesome. They teach you something about yourself if you've never done them before. And they'll make you like surprisingly less scared of weight, right? Like I've watched Burgos go through these like time periods where he can attack weight, and then other times where you can tell, not recently, but in times in the past that I've coached him now for several years, I guess, right? A couple of years at least, where you could tell like you went in timid and you were kind of scared of the weight. There's nothing to be embarrassed of. Like I still get scared of weight. To this day, I get scared of heavy squats. But doing those heavy singles, I've watched this thing like change in him over the last 3 months or so, where he just goes in and attacks the weight. It's like, I'm just going to attack it. And if there's a day where he feels real beat up and something hurts, he knows he doesn't have to go for broke on that day. But like if everything feels healthy, just attack it. Let's just go. And so what we're doing is we're setting the baseline standard, like the PRs keep driving up. And it gives us something new, like significantly higher now to chase. Like your PRs have gone up tremendously over the last several months, without having even done a real meet. We're just doing an online USSF Barbell Logic meet, So he's got a bunch more to do. So, and it's fun. It's fun to go in and just like hit a heavy single, and the back offs aren't that bad usually. And you just get your work in. You're just like, yeah, I get to work up to a heavy single. It's super fun. For us, we rotate what he's doing heavy every 2 weeks. He usually does like a 3 rep max first to kind of get him acclimated to the lift. And then the next week he does a 1 rep max. And he'll do drop sets after the 3 rep max or the 1 rep max. He follows that up with dynamic effort work on the other lifts. So he might go like heavy squat, dynamic effort, speed, deadlifts against bands. That might be like 6 sets of 2 or something like that. Somewhere in that ballpark. And then his accessory movements, and he gets out. So it's fun. To me, it's some of the funnest training you can do.
So one coach asked here if it was necessary to wait until the later stages of training to go ahead and train like that, especially if you're trying to teach a client how to grind through heavy reps.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I saw Daniel asked if they're RPE 10 singles. The RPE is not programmed. Occasionally they are an RPE 10, and it's perfectly okay. Scott and I have a podcast coming out about this where we actually talk about, I actually think there is something to be said for hitting small PRs and leaving a little bit in the tank sometimes. If they're all RPE 10 singles, they're going to crush you fast, and the program is going to stall early. So Vasily Alexiev, the famous Russian Soviet lifter, got paid, I think $5,000 or something like that, $5,000 for every world record he set. And at the time, there was really nobody chasing him. There was you had Serge Redding, and you had Patera, and that was it. And those guys Vasily Alexiev would often set 1 kilo world records. Give me my $5,000. In another couple of weeks, I'm going to set another 1 kilo world record. Give me my $5,000, rather than going for broke. And then he was just doing it probably out of greed. But I've noticed in my own training, it shows the immaturity of either the lifter or the coach or both when they let him go for broke early. So as they get where they're ready and they've gone through, I would have them have at least gone through a sort of like Texas method 4-day split, 3-day or 3-week, 5 week of 5s, week of 3s, week of singles, things like that, before I would let them go into max effort training where they're doing max effort stuff every single week. That would probably be a decent spot to put it, but it would be after that. I think they need to pay their dues there. And then the goal is, so for Burgos, like if he can he comes in, he hits a 15-pound PR on a lower body lift, I'd be like, dude, shut her down. Good. Save it for the next time. You're like, but I think I could put on another 20 pounds and end up with a 35-pound PR and grind myself into powder. And then he's like not going to be able to train the next day, right? Or 2 days later. And so there's something to be said about like just keep hitting those. I'm not really into 2.5-pound PRs unless it's a day that you're like, I feel terrible and I don't think the PR is there. Like you feel like shit and you're like, maybe, all right, then take the 1-pound PR or the 2.5-pound PR. It's okay. But on days that you feel really good, I'm like, just get yourself the solid 5, 10, 15-pound PR, call it good, be done, bag it, save it for the next time we do it, right? Let's just like anything else, the longer Burgos can stay, and all my clients are doing this, that they can stay on this style of training, the better. I want them to be able to stay on. As a matter of fact, it's probably another rule I need to add to the M.E.D. The longer you can stay on that style of training before making that change, the better. Now, you get to a point where you've noticed probably we don't run LP out like the way it was originally talked about in the books. We don't go like on squats and deadlifts for males, for normal aged guys. I would never do less than a 5-pound jump. I'm not going to do 2.5-pound jumps on a deadlift for a normal aged guy. Now, I will on the upper body lifts because they're often light enough that it's the same percentage jump. If you jump 5 pounds on deadlift, if you jump 2.5 pounds on the press, I think it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And then I'm not going to make them grind and grind and grind at 3 sets of 5. Let them stop, let them fail, try it again, let them fail again, reset them, run up again, fail a couple times, reset them again. We don't do that. What do? Wednesday light day. Let's go. Because they make progress faster that way. Guys, thank you so much for taking the class. It's been a blast. It's helped me really put things into perspective. When you teach something, you learn it better. And so it's helped me to solidify my own thoughts about this stuff. So thank you guys for being a part of it and listening to me talk many hours. Talk to you guys soon. See ya.